back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's episode 581. We've got a really great guest here. We've got Tom Fanelli here, founder of Convesio, one of the premier WordPress hosting providers on the market at the present moment. I haven't got my co-host, Stephen. He's bunked off, ladies and gentlemen. No, he had a urgent technical issue to deal with a major client, so I had to excuse him. So, Tom, would you like to quickly introduce yourselves to the listeners and viewers? Just give yourself a 20-second intro.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And, I heard I'm officially auditioning for the part of co-host today. So, I'm looking forward to this.
You seem a very nice person. You don't want to do that.
So my name's Tom Fanelli, and I'm the founder of Convesio. We are a scalable WordPress hosting platform that uses containers and database clusters and multiple servers to host your website so that it can easily scale up and down and handle large surges in traffic. And I've been building websites since the mid-90s. It's been a lot of years. I was doing websites way before WordPress was probably even an idea in Matt's head. And the first sites I built were on a product called Adobe PageMill. So that really dates me. It's like most people have never even heard of that. But
I have.
Yeah. So I've been around the web space a long time. I started my career in an agency and then went to work for a software company. And my sort of DNA, the way I describe myself, is I'm at the intersection of marketing, product, and technology. So I'm a very technical marketing person and less technical technology person. So I do a little bit of command line, sysadmin development stuff, but I wouldn't call myself either one of those, a really good one either way. So yeah, so that's me. And I've been in California the last 12 years and recently moved to Florida. I've got 4 kids and been married for, I think, 18 years now. And so that's me in a nutshell.
Well, that's great. We're going to be talking about recently you've been supporting the WP Agency Summit, i.e. they've been the hosting supplier. That must have had its own individual challenges. We're going to be talking about DigitalOcean's upcoming IPO. We're going to be talking about all things hosting. But before we do that, I've got to mention one of my major sponsors, and it's in the same area, but they're both quality companies, and that's Kinsta Hosting. Kinsta's been sponsoring the show now for almost 3 years now, and they've become great friends of the show. Kinsta is a WordPress-only hosting provider. If you've got a client that's looking for performance, i.e. they've got WooCommerce, a large membership site, a learning membership site, you need good hosting, and that's what you get from Kinsta. They use the power of the Google Cloud, plus they have all the bells and whistles, all the technical things as a developer you are looking for. So if that's interesting, you go over to Kinsta, have a look at one of their packages, and please buy one. And if you do that, please tell them that you heard about them on the WP-Tonic show. It really helps Kinsta, and it really shows support for the show, and that's much appreciated. So, Tom, you've been the backbone of the WP Agency Summit, which I've been watching a bit. I watched a bit of it yesterday, and I think they've done a fantastic job. And that Vito is a friend of mine, and he regularly comes on my roundtable show. So we've been supporting his efforts as much. So what were some of the technical challenges of trying to host something like that, Tom?
Yeah, we sort of had a pre-conference conversation this morning about this with Vito, and I told Vito, I said, look, we gotta tell people what it takes, right, to prepare for an event like this, because the preparation to do this is quite intense. We started by analyzing all the analytics that we had from last year, and if you remember last year, it was like we were out of the gate. It was awesome. And then everything crashed because there was such a huge load on his hosting services. And I don't remember what he was using, but he was on some sort of a single VPS or dedicated server somewhere, and couldn't handle all of the traffic requests that were happening simultaneously. And so, because this is like my people here, right? This is my peers. I'm like, okay, we got to make sure we're fully prepared for this.
Now, I just want to interrupt for a little second. I can think of nothing more resource intensive than a virtual tech summit with multiple video feeds. That must be one of the most difficult things to host possible. I thought I'd just butt in and say that.
Well, and one of the things that's unique about events like this versus like membership sites and e-commerce sites is you get a big spike at a certain time because there's scheduled things that are happening. And so the normal behavior for people is, oh, the first conference is starting 5 minutes before. You've got to be able to handle 1,000 people logging in within, a few minutes of each other. And that is not a common type of load that most e-commerce sites see, or membership sites where people can just log in at their leisure and consume material or purchase. And so that's really sort of what we kind of designed Convesio for. And I shared some stats, but basically, in 2 days, we've processed 2 million requests, 6,000 visitors from 91 countries. And, I was telling Vito, I'm like, this is really impressive that we've reached 91 countries with this, because, we were in a room with a guy who was from Pakistan, and he said, man, I'm just so thankful that you guys are doing this, because there's just a lack of these type of events, even with COVID going on, aside from that, there's a lack of these type of events in certain countries. There's a lack of meetups. We take for granted the fact, being in the United States and the UK and, parts of Europe, like there's very thriving WordPress communities. Some people don't have the ability to network with other people in the space for them. And so that's really awesome that the conference is reaching that. So in order to prepare for this, though, we did a bunch of load testing. So, Vito's currently running on, we have this on the Google Cloud. So we're kind of cloud agnostic. We can run on AWS, Google. We're partnered with another company called Steadfast, which is a great Chicago-based data center. And so, the conference is running on 5 Google C2 compute optimized instances with 16 cores each and 64 gigs of RAM each. There's 5 load balancers deployed. There's 10 front-end WordPress containers and a 3-node Percona database cluster powering the site. And one of the things that we've sort of done that's unique is, many people know, if you're on a VPS or a shared hosting platform, you kind of are confined by the resources you have on that single VPS. And what our platform does is takes the load and distributes it across the cluster. And what I was telling Vito, and we were talking about this morning, is, and he knows this from having to set some of this stuff up for other, the video streaming and stuff, hiring a sysadmin to set up load balancers and a cluster and figuring out distributed WordPress, it's tens of thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars, and probably lots of hair pulling, because you're not going to figure out all the stuff the first time you do it. And we've made this really easy, where it's like you can push a button, poof, your site's running in 10 containers. So yeah.
That's fantastic. But I know from experience what you're dealing with there, that it can really go bad very quickly. And obviously, as a hosting provider, you're really putting your reputation on the line hosting something like that, because it's got to be right, isn't it? Otherwise, it's going to cause you a lot of bad publicity. you know, so I give you
Yeah.
10 out of, I give you 10 out of 10
Well,
for
thank
because
you.
it all seemed to run totally flawless. I didn't have any problems with any. I must have watched 3 of the presentations and they were all flawless,
Well,
Tom.
and I think one of the things that we've done is, you know, we're monitoring us. It's not been flawless, full disclosure. I mean, there have been issues, right? But you just have to have a team ready to sort of respond and deal with them. But one of the things that I think is really important is, you know, we've got New Relic on everything. So we're actually monitoring how fast the conference is loading for end users in real time. And so we can tell, like, how's the backend stack, what's the database doing, what's the end user experience. And so we're watching that stuff to see, are there any anomalies, are there any bottlenecks? And, you know, because you can prep by doing a bunch of load testing, but you're never quite sure what the real use of something is going to be. Like, what are people going to do? We try to overestimate when we do the testing and prepare for the worst possible case scenario. But, you know, there's always issues people run into and face during the live event, and you have to be instrumented to monitor and track that stuff, and then have teams ready to sort of step in and resolve things as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, and also you've got something new that you're launching in the coming week. You said
Yeah.
you were quite happy to discuss it, and you said we're going to be the first place that you're going to be announcing it. So,
Yeah, exactly.
tell us more, Tom.
I
Tell
hope
us
we get it
more.
released next week and we don't become like a typical tech company. We've sure been delayed our fair share of releases, but Vito and the WP Agency Summit are actually running on the next version 3 of our platform. And it's been really great. You know, it worked great because, you know, the conference is powered by a platform called Wahi, which is
Yeah,
Vito's platform that he's sort of developed, which is the underpinnings of it are WordPress. And so it really was a great collaboration and partnership. And if you're thinking of doing an online conference, the platform is done really great. And so I would highly recommend you check it out. And so we're partnering together to host Wahi and provide this service for customers. And the new version of our platform and his version of Wahi, this is sort of the debut of it. The timing just worked out that we were able to do this event, but we're releasing some really cool new features. You know, we've sort of been talking about auto scaling and the ability for you to scale up and all that. The new version of our system is going to expose all of the controls and the settings for customers to manage those settings themselves. So you can actually say, you know, I want to manually scale up. You know, we've had customers come to us and say, I'm going to do a big, you know, newsletter blast, and I want to scale up before it because I'm going to expect a lot of people to come to it. And so you can now control the amount of scaling that your site does with a few clicks of a button. And you can also choose thresholds where, like, if my site gets to 80% CPU capacity, scale up to another instance of it. And so we're really excited because I think there is nothing on the market that makes multi-clustered database, multi-server database nearly this easy to use. It is very simple, a few clicks of the mouse. We've tried to cover up all the really complicated bits and pieces of it and expose it where people want to have advanced settings to control things. But if you compare this to any other platform to set this up and manage scaling, it's just not even anywhere near as close to as easy.
that
We
sounds
really designed
fantastic.
it for those non-technical WordPress business owners or agencies that want to scale sites or have the ability to scale. And you can just turn scaling off too. If you don't want to scale and you're like, I don't want to pay, my sites are landscapers, doctors, lawyers, they don't need scaling. I don't want to have any variable pricing. You can just disable it. And so we've really made it very user friendly and driven by the user and exposed the bits and pieces of it. Whereas before, it was really sort of handled behind the curtain of our platform.
Right. Well, I understand it. So, is he going to be offering this as a plug-in solution, or is he going to be offering it as a SaaS model, or is it going to be hybrid, a bit of both?
Yeah, so for Wahi,
Yes.
yeah, it's going to be a SaaS model, I'm pretty sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, there's two sort of use cases for it. There's the and if you go to wahi dot, I think it's .io. I'll have to check that real quick. But if you go there and you sign up, you can, yeah, wahi.io. You can go check it out. But there's the models are like, it could be your virtual office space for you and your team. And then it also can do events for your business, which are large scale.
I knew he was doing the event bit. I wasn't totally up to what he was doing. Also, this office side. All right.
Yeah.
That's more. All right. I understand.
And you know, I would default to him as
he's always up. He's always up to so many things. That guy.
Right, exactly.
I don't think he actually sleeps at all. Well, he's got a baby, so he probably doesn't. So
he does. Well, I can attest to you, he's sleeping very little during this conference. So I think he's going to sleep for a day or two afterwards. I told him take the weekend off.
He's not. He came on the show. I think 2 weeks ago, my roundtable show, and he said he would, the next couple of weeks he'd be busy with his conference, so totally understandable. But we will be seeing him in April. He's a regular. He comes on the show like once every month, so he's always welcome. So let's go for our break actually, and then when we come back, let's have a chat about DigitalOcean and their IPO and about what's happened to the hosting market in general. So we're going to take our break, folks, and we'll be back with Tom. See you in a few moments. We're coming back. We've had a feast about hosting. It's going to get even more technical to some extent. The hosting business in general, I find it fascinating in a way, just the business side of it. I had, I think it was about 3 months ago, I had Chris Lemmer on the show and from Liquid Web. And I always thought that hosting was dominated by a few really enormous players. And he kind of put me right about that when you look at market share, that it's really dominated by an enormous amount of small players with some very large players like GoDaddy, but it's still extremely fragmented industry. And it seemed for a long time to be an industry that was really set. Like you had shared hosting, you had virtual servers, and then you could have your own physical server. And as you got bigger as a website and busier, you kind of worked your way up from shared hosting to a virtual host to your own server. But then a few years ago, everything seemed to change when it came, and that was cloud hosting. Would I be right about that? The fundamentals, that it was cloud hosting, and that really kind of changed the hosting business fundamentally.
Well, you know, I don't know. I'll give you some color around that, and you can make the decision as to how that fits in with what you just said, which is, I think there's been a maturity of the market. Okay, globally, hosting is about $100 billion a year business. Okay, and it's about 18 million, 20 million, I think, of shared VPS, what I would consider legacy hosting, and then 75 billion of that market is managed hosting. Okay, and this isn't just WordPress, by the way. This is just hosting in general. And so I think what you're seeing is, and if you look at how those are growing, the compounded growth rate of managed hosting is actually twice as much as shared hosting, or as the legacy hosting model, right? The shared and VPS. And I think what's happening, quite honestly, is as the industry matures, people are beginning to realize they can't host real business critical websites on GoDaddy for $2 a month. Okay. I'm not to call out GoDaddy for anything. It's like any shared host. If you're spending $3 a month or $2 a month, and it's all the big guys have done this, you know, the EIGs, the Bluehost, I mean, the HostGators, it's like, you cannot rely on that because you will have issues, and you can't, I mean, at $3 a month, there's no ability for a company to reasonably provide great service with that product. And so the market, in my opinion, is maturing, no question. So the consumers of the market are maturing to higher end solutions. I also think, though, the hosting market is predominantly a Me Too space, which is just bothersome to me, like, because of my DNA, I told you, of the product tech and marketing. Like, I think innovation is what moves things forward. There are so many companies providing a commoditized service by slapping cPanel on a server somewhere and saying, I'm a hosting company, okay? And what's the difference between a cPanel server here, there, or anywhere else? And very little, right? And so, you know, it's like there's not a lot of tech innovation happening with these companies. Now you have the companies like Kinsta, Pantheon, and I'm a huge advocate, and I wrote this article and talked about this months ago, and I'm like, you know what? Everybody should carve off every WordPress agency. You know, there's a lot of agencies where they're like, oh, I don't want to move to a Kinsta or WP Engine or a Convesio or Pantheon because they're too expensive. Everybody should have some of their sites on one of those hosts, even if you don't host all of them there. It's kind of like you should stand by the companies innovating in your space. And so I think that there's a lot of hosting noise out there, which is all just cPanel, right? And so when you clear that stuff aside and you clear the large commoditized hosters aside, what are you left with? You're really left with a pretty fragmented market, like you just said, which is a lot of different people providing specialized higher end services. And of course, the 800-pound gorilla in our space is WP Engine, soon to have an IPO. Very excited about that. I think that's going to be a really big moment in the WordPress space because unlike GoDaddy and EIG, they are pure play WordPress only hosts. There's a lot of hosting companies that are public, but this is going to be, you know, them and Automatic are the true unicorns, maybe followed by Pantheon, are the true unicorns in the space that are going to be our first billion-dollar you know, companies in WordPress only. And I think they're the first of what we're going to see as many in the future. Because I think once the ceiling is broken and we have a company go public, it's going to change the dynamic of investment in the WordPress space, startups in the WordPress space. There's already a lot of entrepreneurial people, but I would say that there are a lot of startups, but there's not a lot of venture funded startups. You know, the Elementors, the Convesios, these type of people that are funded with millions of dollars in funding behind them. They're few and far between. And so I think you're going to see a lot of that more VC money pour into the market. We're already seeing it. Look at Stratic, right? And Elementor are great examples, led by, you know, Bay Area tier 1 VCs.
Yeah, I think for the next 2 to 4 years we're in for some interesting times. I don't think anybody can really tell how all this is going to play out.
Yeah,
but it's going to
be. But I will tell you though, the segue there is one of the other things I wrote you about. You know, there's 2 metrics really important on how this will play out, and I think that the big thing is growth. Okay. I mean, WordPress by 2025 is going to be a 50% market share, they expect. And Google just said that their cloud business, which is at $13 billion in revenue now, they think is going to triple over the next 5 years, which is like, they think is going to get to $760 billion. That is astronomical, okay? And so what is driving all of that? Well, one of the things driving it was what DigitalOcean said in their S1 filing for their IPO, which is they expect in the next, this number is a little hazy, there's like 19 million developers right now. They expect in the next 5 or 10 years that to be to 49 million, I think was the number they gave. So Developers are going to more than double. Cloud infrastructure spending is going to triple. I mean, this is all real, and WordPress is going to have hopefully 50% market share. These are great things for people in the WordPress space.
Yeah, I think. I think it's the reason I'm humming and hawing a little bit is that I can see exactly your point of view, and I'm not disputing the facts that you've put in front of me. I suppose I think one of the things that I found a bit frustrating, and I've been very public about it, Tom, but I've tried to be constructive about it, but I wasn't prepared to modify my comments, is I've been very frustrated with Gutenberg and the whole, it's just seemed to have, I actually wasn't critical of Matt's position on Gutenberg and the necessity for a page builder, because I could understand totally that it was required and the market required it. So much better that it comes from automatic than then allowing the likes of Wix, of Squarespace, just to keep increasing their market share. But I have been a bit aghast at the slowness of getting Gutenberg finished and ending up with a product that is the equivalent of Squarespace. But on the other hand, it's been pointed out to me that I'm not dealing with a platform that's running almost 30 to 40% of all websites out there, and all the legacy code that's required to try. And these two companies that I mentioned, they're not having to deal with that, are they?
Right. And, look, I mean, I know I feel this way too, but everybody wants, for me, for my company, and for work, everyone wants everyone to move faster and develop faster and, get to market the features that we really sort of need now. And it's challenging. And so there's a whole other vector of challenge there, which is WordPress does, I think, better than anyone, which is the nature of it being open source, right? And so that's another, point that the Wixes and the Squarespaces of the world, by the way, did you see the Squarespace just got valued at $10 billion? I mean,
no, I didn't see that. No,
they just raised another 300 or 400 million last week. I think they announced it, and they're raised at or valued at $10 billion. So that's a decacorn, not a unicorn. So it's insane, and that's the other part of this too is that the valuations in the space are going up, and up, and so yeah, I do hear your frustration with Gutenberg. When I was at the last WordCamp US, I really saw for the first time, I kind of had this premonition of Gutenberg is the future, and it's like this is clearly they're going all in on this with there's a big vision behind it, and so it really does feel like at this point it's this unstoppable thing. Although there's a lot of people in my circles, agency circles, who are just never going to give up, Elementor, Oxygen, Beaver Builder, and all the tools that they love to build sites. And so I do think that Gutenberg is going to be one of these things that we'll have to wait and see how it gets traction. I mean, it's sure amazing. Yeah. It's amazing how people are so anti-Gutenberg, though.
I suppose I have come across a bit like that, and it is unfortunate because I'm really not actually. But I can understand why people get that slight impression when they listen to, especially the Roundtable show. But in my heart, I'm not really at all. Actually, I totally understand. I think one of the other factors, Tom, is I think they also took over WooCommerce, and I think just taking on one WooCommerce on its own was an enormous project, but taking that on WooCommerce plus Gutenberg at the same time has really stretched automatic a lot, almost, I wouldn't say to breaking point, but taking on both of those projects at the same time. And in some ways, I'm not criticizing them, because unfortunately, I think they were right. They probably had to take both on at the same time. But they're both enormous projects.
You're forgetting about one other huge, enormous project that they took on, Tumblr.
Yes, yes, I mean, do.
If there was one thing I wasn't quite sure of when it was happening, I was like, what's going on here? And so I would much rather, I'd love to see, I don't know what the plan is for Tumblr. I haven't been able to figure that quite out yet. I mean, I've heard what they've articulated as the plan, but you know, it's one of these things where it's like, man, it bothers me when I see Shopify, when I see people moving to Shopify from WooCommerce, and I see Shopify growing at the rate that it's growing and cannibalizing WooCommerce, you know, customers. And at the worst, I mean, at the least, I guess, you know, at the worst, it's like winning people over from WooCommerce and they're converting. But at the least, it's like there were all these people that wanted to get online and wanted an easy way to do it. And WooCommerce or Shopify scooped them up because WooCommerce didn't have a really good, easy way to just set up a store and get to transacting unless you knew WordPress really well. And that was a massive missed opportunity, I think, for either WordPress Automatic or WooCommerce.
That's great. You're okay to keep on going for a little while for our bonus content, but we're going to wrap up the podcast part of the show. I like to keep it to around about 30 minutes for the podcast part. So Tom, what's the best way for people to find out more about yourself and your company?
Yeah, sure. So you can go to convesio.com, Convesio. That's actually a combination of container, vessel, and IO.
Oh, what did you got it?
Convesio. There you go. Yeah. So Convesio. So you can go to convesio.com. You can hit me up on LinkedIn, Tom Fanelli, and I'm on Twitter, T Fanelli, or Convesio on Twitter as well, and would love to chat. And you can also email me too at tom@convesio.com.
And he's very approachable, folks. So, which some people aren't, but I give Tom, he's very approachable. Before we wrap up the podcast part of the show, folks, I want to tell you about a free webinar me and Spencer Forum, a regular on my Roundtable show, is doing this on April the 9th. We always do these webinars on the second Friday of the month, and it'll be at 10:30 Pacific Standard Time, 10:30 a.m. And we're going to be talking about using the power of WordPress to build funnels and a funnel system that's the equivalent of ClickFunnels or Shopify at a fraction of the price. And we'll be going through all the plugins and all the steps that you need to build these modern funnels for your clients. And we will be showing you practically how to do it live. And you can watch that live on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel. You can register by going to the WP-Tonic website. There's a button in the main navigation that says webinar, and you can then will be taken to a page and you just click a button to register, and it will tell you through YouTube when we're going live, and it's all free, folks. So please join us. We'll be back next week with another great guest and another great discussion. We'll see you soon, folks. And keep with us for the bonus content. See you soon. Bye. So bonus content. So yeah, to continue the discussion as we're doing through the podcast, yeah, that's really a great. I just totally forgot about Tom. You know, they really have got a lot on their plate.
They do, yeah. They absolutely do.
That is, thinking about it, what has happened and what is happening is totally understandable, really. So what do you think about? Because I had one of the founders of WooCommerce on the show last week, and we were talking about his recent book, and we were having a discussion about the history of WooCommerce. So do you know, I would imagine that they must be looking. Do you think they're going to be able to really to get to grips with WooCommerce and do what is the opportunities are enormous, really, aren't they? And then I was reading about Square and all the big players are looking at digital wallets, and they must be salivating at a platform like WooCommerce, mustn't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, well, for the payment space is another one of those ones that's been just massive, right? And I mean, you look at e-commerce payments, and it's just a massive growth area, and I think it's been nothing but accelerated because of COVID, right? Everyone's building stores. You've got restaurants building stores where people can order online, powered by WooCommerce. You've got restaurants doing Shopify stores. There's platforms to get people online. People are doing delivery services now. Local businesses are getting online due to COVID. And so it's really accelerated e-commerce, in my opinion, quite a bit. And it's pushed people who were either resistant to getting online. It's forced their hand to say, you've got to find a way to have your customers transact other than just being in store with you. And so all of those factors together, I think, are making payments, online shopping, just a really big market right now that people are taking very, very seriously. But yeah, I also think that, again, selfishly, I just wish WooCommerce was further along at helping people get online and get to their first transaction. I think that's where the Shopifys of the world have really done well, is they've made the getting online very, look, back in the old days, we used to have to sign up for merchant accounts through authorize.net, which was the biggest pain in the butt. I mean, you remember it took a month to get approval, credit checks, paperwork, contracts had to be signed. I mean, come on. And Shopify disrupted things because they had that Shopify payments thing where you didn't even need a merchant account. Like, they would provide the merchant account. Now you have Stripe and Square and all these ones that just are super easy. And even PayPal was a hassle. Remember when you had to get a PayPal Pro account and it required all these steps to be able to actually process a person's payment on your website? I mean, look how far we've come in the short period of time. Well, maybe not that short, but we've come far since then.
So when it comes to your own company, what, like somebody like Liquid Web, obviously they've really kind of focused on WooCommerce. I was thinking WP Engine. I would say that with their purchase of Studio Press, they really have attempted to become the darling of a certain group of the developer class in WordPress, haven't they? Because one of the things they were probably purchasing through that purchase from the two Bryans was that community of almost 100,000 Quasar developer types that was part of Genesis. So they're really kind of appealing to what tribe are you trying to appeal to, Tom? Who's going to be your tribe?
That's a great question. I had a profound moment, actually, and it was actually Vito who said this, because when you're a startup, one of the things that can be great and not great is you try to get everyone to be your customer, right? You're just like trying to sell anyone, in the beginning. And you always hear about people saying niche down, get a niche, right? And one of the challenges that I think is, I was asking Vito. Vito's like, oh yeah, I'm doing this thing, but there's all these agencies there, and it hit me because at the beginning we were like, we're going to target agencies, right? It's for a lot of great reasons. It's technical users. They can be somewhat early adopters. They're not a one-to-one. They bring a portfolio of sites and all that. And what we found was, not all agencies are built equally, right? And I don't want to say created equally. They've chosen to structure their business to go after different people. And when Vito was like, oh, I'm doing this thing, and it was with this crowd, and I said, oh, like, well, can Convesio again? He's like, these aren't your people, man. These are like, just people just starting out. And I'm like, it hit me, and I'm like, man, that's right. Like, there's a certain use case that we rightfully should be known for, right? And it's not everybody. Like, we work with a lot of people, and they're like, oh, I'm coming from SiteGround or Flywheel, and I'm like, look, we can't compete on pricing with those companies because our stack is completely built differently. And so when we look at this, I think the people we want to service it's clearly in a very e-commerce membership publishers, large scale, medium scale websites that have, and I think there's this forgotten middle ground. There's a forgotten mid-market in the space. And I see this interesting thing with WP Engine where people are coming to us and they're basically like, man, I'm on WP Engine. So they're not paying cheap, right? They're paying, for a premium service, but they're hitting capacity and they have to upgrade, and their bill is like quadrupling from WP Engine. And that's this forgotten middle market.
Those VCs want to return, Tom.
That's right, they do. And when you have a company that's already doing 150 plus million with the Flywheel acquisition, you can't be selling $20 a month accounts each month. You got to be selling $200, $500, $2,000 a month enterprise accounts, mid-market accounts. And so I think as they get more aggressive on their pricing, we actually saw this happen before. A perfect example of this is actually Salesforce. And Jason Lemkin, who's a really popular VC in the Bay Area, said, the crumbs that fall off Salesforce's plate are going to create 10 different billion-dollar CRM competitors. That's like, they've reached such a huge scale that just the people who are churning off of them because they're frustrated with something, had a bad experience, we're tired of paying the high prices, is gonna keep 10 other companies in tremendous growth mode. And I think that's one of the things that we're kind of seeing from WP Engine, because not just because they're the biggest, but it's like, I think as they move upstream and try to get more, there's going to be more unsettling with them, and so they're going to look for alternatives. And so I think we're going after, to just put a fine point on your question, membership sites, e-com sites, large publisher sites, agencies specializing in like business critical e-commerce sites, websites doing tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month in transactions. And they've got big followings, and they're like, we're going to do a big email blast, and we got to be able to handle it when people come there. And we don't want the site to go down. The worst case thing is the site crashes. The second worst case thing is someone's trying to check out, and there's a lot of people on the site, and it just gets slow. And so that's the kind of protection you have with us, is when your site starts to get to load, we make more sites for you, and we clone it, and that's, I think there's a lot of people that are hitting that. There's more member sites that are growing because of COVID and people doing things online, and they're realizing, wow, it's not easy to scale a database layer, and you just can't cache everything.
Well, yeah, that there was truer words were said there. But I wasn't being, and I think you took it in the right heart. It's people think you can just choose your tribe, or it's a more of a process, really. A true tribe it can't be totally planned, if you understand. It's a kind of organic, it's feedback from, it's a gradual, because you enter a market and you think you know everything about it if you're wise, but as you enter it, you realize that this wasn't positioned properly, and you're not using the right language that really relates to the tribe that you're trying to relate to. So fins are a much kind of cybernetic, that's a big word, isn't it? But what it means is you respond from a feedback loop. So it's more of that kind of setup. I don't think you can fully plan it all out. I don't know, how long have you been running your company then, Tom?
Well, we had been in R&D for a couple of years prior to launching, but we launched commercially, officially in January of 2020. So
Right.
we're still early.
You are, because it does take a couple of years for you to really focus on because I think you were right to point out WP Engine, because if you had obviously their founder is one, I've attempted to interview him a couple of times, but he doesn't do many interviews. But he's one of the smartest people around. So when he declared he was going into WordPress hosting, my eyes, I thought, well, he knows what he's doing. But a lot of people are quite negative also. But obviously he saw the opportunity, and that a lot of people just couldn't see it, could they?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Pagely was the first in the market. I mean, they sort of defined managed WordPress hosting, and I think we owe a lot to those guys. And you mentioned Kinsta. I mean, these are companies I look up to. Like, I mean, I look up to I look up to Kinsta. I mean, they just there's a lot to admire about what they're doing. There's a lot of stuff to like at Cloudways. WP Engine, man, they're a testimony of look how big they've gotten. I mean, they've had tremendous success. I mean, nobody's perfect, right? I can, poke holes in some things they're doing, but you got to admire the success that they've had in the space. And, I'm just proud to be here. There's something about, through this process of finding your tribe, I had done, this is my third or fourth startup, but it's the first one that's mine. It's my baby. Like Convesio was the itch that I had to scratch. It was this idea that was stuck with me for 10 years on how to do hosting for WordPress. And so it's one thing when you work for another founder in a startup early on and it's successful, you don't feel that level of ownership, but when it's your baby, the feeling you get when people turn into raving fans of your product and they love it, that is, to me, when you say finding your tribe, it's who are my raving fans, and when you feel that feeling of, man, this was my idea, I brought it to life through the help of an amazing team, that feeling when you see people fall in love with it and that you don't know, not your friends and family, but strangers, that is an awesome feeling. And I'm just honored to be part of this and part of a really tiny part, quite frankly, of the story of where WordPress is going and hosting. And, you look at the people that have just gone before us and they've made a path. And so I'm just incredibly thankful to be where we're at right now and, on the journey.
Well, I think that's a good spot to wrap it up. Tom, thank you so much for joining us. You have to come back later on in the year. I've really enjoyed our conversation, actually. I know we've covered a lot of ground, but yeah. I think we've kept it on, or you've managed to keep it on target. I tend to waffle a little bit, but I don't think it was too bad, was it, Tom? So we're going to wrap it up now, folks. We'll be back next week with another great guest, another great conversation. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.